Today we're talking about the awakening to prosperity. And everything I've studied, everything I've read here in the last couple of weeks has shown me that prosperity is really only possible when we begin to awaken to our own true identity. As long as we're wearing masks, as long as we're pretending, we're never going to find true prosperity. We might own this part, we might have this part, but in fact, we will not be truly prosperous. And my talk today is inspired by this book, Spiritual Economics by Eric Butterworth. And I want to give him just a few credits before we start. Reverend Eric Butterworth, is a giant, and I mean giant, in the unity movement. He was born in 1916 and he made his transition in 2003. He was then ordained in 1948 at Unity Village, same one that many of us have been to. After he was ordained, he was a minister in Pittsburgh and Detroit for about 11 years. And in Detroit, he spoke at the Unity Temple of Detroit, which is a huge building. And he spoke to over 2,000 people every single Sunday morning. 2,000 people. That is shocking to me. And then he moved to New York City because that wasn't a big enough venue for him. And he ended up speaking at Town Hall, Carnegie Hall. Some of you might have heard Carnegie Hall. And finally, Avery Fisher Hall. Avery Fisher Hall is there today under a different name, but it seats 2,783 people. And he routinely filled that place up. He had something that most people don't have. He was able to speak in real language to real people and touch hearts. He didn't speak like Fillmore did or Emily Cady, and sometimes you listen to their language, you go, what in the world are they saying? Because you can't understand it. Some of my classmates at school learned to speak like that, and they would give talks like that up on stage. I have no idea what they were talking about. And I knew what they should be talking about. So Eric Butterworth's gift was be able to take complex things and say it so us normal folks could really understand what he was saying. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that he did say, in his book, Spiritual Economics, right off, there's a very few pages in, he says this. And Eric Butterworth is blunt. He doesn't pull punches. He tells it like it is. And he says, you might as well know at the outset that there's only one way by which you can achieve prosperity. That's a big statement. It is to take charge of your mind. You may be looking for some kind of formula, some kind of miracle, some kind of metaphysical cliche that will change things in your life. But if you want to change your life, you'll have to alter your thoughts. Most of us don't want to hear it. We want something easy. We want to go down to the 7-Eleven and buy something to fix this problem, but he knew better. He knew better. He said things like, God can do no more for you than he can do through you. What he knew is that most of the time we are the block from our good. We are the people making the decisions that messes up our life. And he said, God can't work with you unless you're working with God, which I thought was really true. He also said, we're only prosperous to the extent we believe that we deserve it. That's also a difficult one, because most of us don't want to look inside. Most of us don't want to evaluate what's going on. And yet it is that lack of evaluation that keeps us from being as prosperous as we can possibly be. And what I really love about his writing is it was so clear and so direct, something I really appreciate. So my talk today is not on his book, but it has been inspired by his book in for me, a very surprising way. When I first started thinking about giving a sermon or a talk on prosperity, One of the things people often use is Matthew 7:7, which is almost the last thing Jesus is supposed to have said at the Sermon on the Mount. And it said, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you." And I tried to want to be able to talk about that. But it seemed like I didn't know if I was begging God for a miracle or if I was talking to a God out there, but that didn't feel right either. And it actually kind of felt cold and sort of inauthentic to me. And I know I shouldn't say that about the Bible, but that's what it felt to me. I didn't relate to this topic. And so I was going to just set that aside. I did set that aside. And then as I began to read his book, it turns out that Eric Butterworth spoke about that too. And that got my interest. And he said, Butterworth was making the point that we must first ask before we receive. And then he said this: "It is interesting that the word ask, as Jesus uses it, comes from a Greek root that carries the sense of claiming and even demanding." And in my lifetime, I've seen a lot of traditional and fundamental preachers get up in front of people and demand that Jesus do something for them, demand that somebody's going to be healed in the name of Jesus. And they meant it. They believed it. And that concept came exactly from this definition of the word ask. And I never knew that before. It's not that I believe it, but that's where it came from. And that's where all these many preachers can't stand up and say in a very demanding voice that they want this miracle to be showered upon them. But I didn't believe that. And then I looked at the other part that really struck me. It says, as Jesus uses it, comes from the Greek root. Jesus didn't speak Greek. Jesus spoke Aramaic. Every word that he ever said was in Aramaic. Not even sure that he was literate, but he spoke every word in Aramaic. And I wondered in my mind when I saw that, number one, why did Eric Butterworth say it that way? But I also wondered, did he ever think about what the Aramaic would mean if we could go back and see what that language really was? Would it tell us something deeper? Would it fill our hearts in a different way? So I did something kind of unusual. I don't know if you know, most people think that the New Testament is completely written in Greek, which is true. And most people will tell you that there is no remnants of Aramaic left in the world. It disappeared. That is not true. The eastern portion of Turkey, which is where Paul was preaching like crazy, developed a huge number of Aramaic-speaking Christians during that time. They began, unknown to most people, but they began to form churches there that exist today from the 2nd century. The churches that are there use a Bible known as the Peshitta. It is written purely in Syriac, which is actually Aramaic language. So I said, okay, if that's the case, what does that Bible say about ask and it will be given to you? Can we learn something different? Now, I had no idea what I was going to find. None. Never did this before in my life. So Eric Butterworth says the word ask means demand and claim. He did say it didn't mean to beg, all that. So he was right about that. But what can we learn from that? In the Aramaic or Syriac language, which exists today from 4 or 5 of the longest continuous running churches in the entire world that go back to the 2nd century, the word ask in Aramaic/Syriac doesn't mean ask, it doesn't mean demand. It means create an inner space. It means open yourself. Still touches me. It means become receptive. It is the act of making room within so that what is already present in us can rise into awareness. My view of what that first parable line said, or spiritual line said, was create inner space. and what is already yours will become known to you. I think that is what Jesus was saying. I think that's maybe a touch of what Jesus' voice sounded like, because he astounded people in the way he spoke. Seek is the next word. Seek and you will find. Discover what is already true within you is what the Aramaic would say. It's saying attune to yourself within. Go within. Learn what's true for you. Align to your truth so that you can discover what is already true within. We seldom do that. So I think that seek and you will find really probably meant something like look within yourself for the truth that has always been there. And that's the truth. Knock. Knock and the door will be opened for you. Now, knock in Aramaic is not somebody pounding on a door. Wake up, come on, demand, here, come show me. Come give me a miracle. Something totally different. The first word I saw was tap. Like tap on your shoulder. I want to get your attention. Tap. And then it also means to gently make your presence known. Isn't that totally different from knock and pound on a door and be aggressive? It means to approach with humility, to approach a door with humility, to signal readiness, to turn inward with openness is what the word knock means in Aramaic. So it's saying we are approaching the doorway of our own soul. The word door, the Aramaic word is tara. They're not ever talking about, in Aramaic spirituality, a door of a house. They're talking about an inner doorway within us. The word door, tara, in Aramaic means an inner gateway, a threshold of awareness, an opening of the heart. And perhaps the one I kind of like best is the portal where divine presence meets human consciousness. That's pretty cool. So listen to, if we take all that together, by this time I found myself getting a little emotional because I really believe then and now that I was discovering and perhaps even recovering some of the essence of the man known as Jesus, of what he was really saying, because he had to be doing something so special to get these people to understand and to remember him like he did. So it could be, yes, it could be ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you, or it could be something substantially different. So if I was writing this for Jesus in Aramaic, I would say, ask Jesus to say, my dear friends, take a moment to create an inner space, and what is already yours will come to you. Turn inward, and you will discover what has always been true for you. Approach the inner doorway of your own soul with humility and openness. And the way into deeper awareness will open before you. I think that is what he was trying to say. I think that's what he's trying to say to us. And I love that so much because in this talk on prosperity, prosperity is an inside job. It's not an outside job. It's an inside job. The more you find out who you truly are, the more you fully understand your honest, true identity, the more prosperous we will all be in every aspect of our life, because now we're speaking from a place of strength, a place of truth. Jesus continually said, the kingdom of heaven is within, 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 within. Everything about this translation from the Aramaic Syriac says exactly the same thing. It's always an inside job. I had never done that before, but it affected me deeply, actually. So a lot of people talk about prosperity use the parable of the prodigal and his brother. That's actually what it says, the parable of the prodigal and his brother. I always call it the prodigal son, but that's not what's in there. But I don't worry about that too much, because when the language was originally written in the New Testament, there were no titles at all. Those titles have been added centuries and centuries later primarily by the people who developed the printing press. And they had to separate it out, so they themselves chose the titles to put on those. Most of the titles are probably not even what should have been used. So if you remember the prodigal son, it says there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that falls to me." And the father divided his living between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country, where he squandered his property in loose living. But if we take a look at this again from what that could have meant from the Aramaic, it kind of brings it up a few notches in my opinion. So when you look at that, the father divided his living between them. In the Syriac, it makes this explicit. It says he divided to them his essence, because the father in this prodigal son story is God. The younger son is our wayward self, our ego self. And the older brother is the one who becomes resentful. And yet, isn't it strange that both of them were given the same gift? They were given the essence, the heart of their father. Both of them had the same gift. And yet they both treated that gift completely separately. Both of them threw it away in different ways. We do funny things as human beings. So I believe that it was also saying, in my view, that every soul begins with the same divine inheritance. All of us. We all start with the same divine inheritance. We are individual expressions of God, but we all start with the same divine love that we receive when we were created as thought. I believe that it also is saying no one is born with more God than another. And I love that, because we are one group, one being. So now we go back, and it's further down, and it talks about a far country. In the Greek language, that means specifically a geographical place. He went to Austin. He went somewhere. Took his money and spent it at the bars in Austin, probably. But in Aramaic, the far country doesn't mean that at all. It means he traveled to a place of separation or disconnection. It's basically saying this young man got a bunch of money, lost his mind, went to Austin, spent it all, and ended up slopping pigs for a big part of his life. That's what the story is really saying. But isn't that interesting? So the word separation was suggesting that was no longer in touch with his own divine identity. He thought he knew everything. That happens to us, doesn't it? Wander off thinking we know all the answers, when in fact, we might not know any of the answers. But I like that. He journeyed into a state of mind where he simply forgot who he was. But just when everything was lost, and he literally was, the story really says that he was slopping pigs for a friend. He was totally broke. Nobody wanted to talk to him anymore. He ran out of money. Couldn't buy drinks at the bar anymore, so he had no friends, because that is what happens. It said he came to his senses, but this was a turning point. This was the beginning for that young man of prosperity consciousness. He had been living in poverty consciousness the entire time he left home. I want what's mine. I want to go spend it my way. I know what I'm doing, but he didn't. He didn't at all. And I think most of us have probably been in that spot before. He was essentially at the bottom of the pit. He was he was as deep as he could possibly get into it. And for most of us, we need to get to that bottom before we can begin to come back up. And that's what was happening to him. It said He came to his senses. And this literally means in Aramaic, he returned to his own soul. He began to remember who he was. And that moment of remembering was the moment of awakening for him towards moving towards prosperity consciousness for him. So the thing that's important about this story is that, yes, we can walk into a mess. We can make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We can bounce off the bottom of our lives, but there's always a way back if we remember who we are. He went back and his father greeted him with big fanfare, never said, "Where have you been? What have you done? Where's my money?" None of that. Nothing at all. Because that's not how God is with us. God loves, doesn't judge. God loves, no matter what we do. Always there. We're the ones who walk away, always. But God's always there. And that's what this story is saying. I want to talk a little bit about the Good Samaritan real quickly. Most people don't think this is a story about prosperity, but actually I think it is a strong story about a type of prosperity. And if you know the story very well, you know that there was a man who was injured on the side of the road. The priests and the Levite and everything, they just looked over at him and said, that's not for me. The Samaritan man, who I think you might know, but the Samaritans in that time were absolutely hated by the Jewish people. They were not allowed to enter the gates of Jerusalem. If you're a Samaritan and I'm a Jewish person, I can't even acknowledge that you exist. They became, by law, by Jewish law, a totally invisible human beings, even though they were Hebrew, which is a strange thing how our prejudices do that sometime. But the story goes, the Samaritan man actually looks over and sees this man who's injured. And in the Aramaic, it suggests that he doesn't just see the man who's injured. He sees within that man as a sacred human being, as the identity within him. Not just the guy that's bleeding on the side of the road, but this is a human being, and he is sacred to me. The Samaritan does go and help him out, bandages his wounds, puts him on his animal, which means support I can offer you today. I'm going to give it all to you, everything I have to you. Takes him to the inn and gets him a place to stay, gets him some food, and then he has to leave. The Samaritan has to leave the next day, so he gives the innkeeper money to take care of this man he doesn't even know. And then he gives the innkeeper enough money to take care of him for as long as the Samaritan man is going to be off on his business. This is a different kind of prosperity. This is the prosperity of unconditional love. This is the prosperity of giving of yourself with no expectation ever of receiving back. And we all do that. Lots of everybody in this room does that all the time. But it's a part of prosperity that people don't really talk about, is that as we give away, so shall we receive. And I love that about this particular parable. So what I'd like to do is bring all this back to where we started. And I want to use what we learned in the very first section of ask and it shall be given to you. And this time I'm going to ask you all to settle down and think about going into meditation. Get comfortable. And as I read these words that we spoke earlier, I want you to think if you can just hear a hint of whether these are the words Jesus actually spoke. I personally believe they are. I personally believe we've been given the gift of hearing that. And then we'll move from there directly into the meditation. So just stay where you are and let's begin with this. And let's see if we can hear that voice speaking to us from the top of this mound. And we're part of that group. seated in front of Jesus himself. And he might say at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, my dear friends, take a moment to create an inner space, and what is already yours will come to you. Turn inward now, and you will discover what has always been true. As we approach the inner doorway of your own soul with humility and openness, the way into deeper awareness will open before you. We know that Jesus spoke over and over again about the fact that the kingdom of heaven is within us. And when we create the inner space to listen to that still small voice, we will finally awaken to our true prosperity consciousness. Let's take this into meditation. I invite you now to gently close your eyes and let your breath soften. Let your shoulders release and let your heart open just a little more. Let the mind settle. Let the body rest gently where you are right now. And let the heart remember who you really are. With your next breath, allow yourself to create an inner space. Feel the quiet room within you, the spaciousness, the openness, the place where truth rises gently into our awareness. And silently hear yourself say, I create inner space, and what is mine comes to me. Now turn your attention even more inward, as if you're turning toward a warm light within your own being. You're not searching the world. You are remembering what has always been true. You hear this still small voice saying, turn inward and discover what has always been true for you. Now imagine yourself standing before a soft, glowing doorway. No, this is not an external door. This is the doorway of your own soul, the threshold of awareness, the opening of the heart. Approach it now with humility, with readiness, with love. Silently hear that still small voice say once again, I now approach the inner doorway of my own soul. And as you do, the door will open effortlessly, as if it has been waiting for you all along. And it has. Step through the doorway into a space of peace, a space of abundance, a space of divine presence. Feel the truth of Jesus' invitation, perhaps, when you hear what is already yours will come to you. Rest here in the quiet, in the fullness, in that living heart of prosperity. Think about what prosperity means to you. Think about opening your heart. And let's stay still in the silence for a few moments. As you begin to come back to the room, take one more slow breath in and a long, gentle breath out. And when you are ready, and only when you're ready, begin to bring your awareness back to this room, back to your body, back to this moment, carrying with you the truth of who you really are. You are now awakened. You are now connected. You are now abundant. And you are the living heart in this living universe. And so it is. Thank you so much.